Okay, I'll get started. I'm Ed Sherwood. I am the Vice Chair for Research at Vanderbilt. And I don't know if you want kind of an overview of basically what I do, but I kind of took a different path to probably than most people. I'm getting into an academic career. Right out of college, I actually did my PhD in physiology and then went on and did a postdoc at Northwestern in the Cancer Center studying prostate cancer, which is not really very related to anesthesia. But at the end of that was offered a faculty position at Northwestern, but decided, I don't need a real job yet. I'm going to go to medical school. So went to medical school, and during medical school I stayed fairly heavily involved in research, especially during the last year of medical school, and then went on to residency. As a resident, I didn't do any research at all, just focused on clinical training. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a job by Don Pro at University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, and he offered me 50% protected time to get research going in the lab, and 50% clinical. I was fortunate enough to get a KO8 at that point. They gave me, since I'd already done a PhD and a postdoc, they only gave me 3 years of funding, and then luckily, after about a year and a half in my KO8, I submitted an R01, got that, and have continued to be NIH R01 funded ever since then. And my main interest is in innate immunity. I study the host response to infection, and especially how microbial products reprogram metabolism within myeloid cells and innate immune cells to change how our immune system responds to infection. However, as Vice Chair for Research, outside of that interest, I'm heavily involved in the clinical research component of the department, and I have run a sepsis clinical trial and also in the informatics component. So I'm very familiar with pretty much any trajectory that anyone would want to pursue as part of their academic career.
Let me see if we can get this. There we go. So how far back should I start? But I was at Cleveland Clinic for 22 years as a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist. And along the way, had 3 children and knew I wanted to be a department chair, but knew I couldn't do it with 3 kids, particularly teenagers. So I planned most of my academic career around my family in terms of when I could get the kids launched, the youngest driving 2 months with no tickets, and then started looking for anesthesia chair jobs. And he's still a work in progress at University of Southern Cal, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I did get 3 kids to adulthood, so he's 21. But beyond that, along the way, I very strategically planned, what is it going to take to be a department chair and a successful department chair? And I have a master's in biostatistics and clinical trial design. That was after I was an attending. I trained at Brigham, was on faculty there, and then moved to Cleveland Clinic. I also talked to seated chairs and asked, what is it if you could go back in time, and was there a degree or an experience that you wished you would have had to make you more successful, or at least the ramp-up time when you became chair to be pretty smooth? And a lot of them said an MBA. And so I knew I was about 7 years out from launching the kids, and and it took me about 2.5 years to get an MBA. But I got an MBA at night, and I think that that's been very helpful. So each step along the way, I was asked to run research and education for our Quality and Patient Safety Institute at Cleveland Clinic. And in doing so, went to Intermountain Healthcare, got executive training in healthcare delivery research. So each step along the way was asked then to take on an appointment in medical operations, which I love as a side, I don't want to say a side hobby. So I took on a lot of leadership roles at Cleveland Clinic. Again, waiting to get my children launched, loved it. My career was in clinical research. I was still doing clinical research. I was doing clinical care and cardiothoracic anesthesia, developing research and educational programs for quality and safety, and appointments in MedOps. So I had a lot of different hats. It was very exciting. But then started interviewing for chair jobs about the time that I wanted my family to be ready for it and when I was ready. So I assumed the chair job at Johns Hopkins 5 years ago. And an interesting thing is you start looking at your career, and if you do have future aspirations, when you have seen one chair job, you've only seen one. So each department is so different. And the reason I chose Johns Hopkins was that in an academic chair job there, you function as a hospital COO of like a moderate-sized hospital, so you have a ton of operational responsibilities. Half of my paycheck's paid for by the hospital and health system, the other half is a school of medicine traditional academic chair job. So because of my interest in medical operations and the lengthy time I've spent doing med ops as well as quality safety, this was just the ideal job that fit my skill set and what our dean was looking for. So I've been chair for 5 years, and I'll just talk one brief thing about research in our department. When I got to Hopkins, incredible scholarly department, but a majority of the scholarship was done in basic science and a little bit in clinical research, but not much. I have 220 physician anesthesiologists on 5 campuses, and my goal was to engage everybody in scholarly work if you're going to be in an academic medical center. So I had a group of folks who are have some master's clinical trials work, so I started a clinical research core. We had a basic science core. I started a clinical research core with a database manager. Research nurses really shored that up. They had elements of it there, but not to the extent that I wanted. Then I had a whole group of folks who have master's degrees in education, and they were stuck at the assistant professor level. So I had wanted to start an education research core where I hired a PhD educator, put those education folks, moved them from the residency program into this, and so we have an amazing ERC, is what we call it, Education Research Core, which has e-labs, journal clubs, education in that. I also then had a whole group of people who do implementation science, whose appointments were jointly with our Armstrong Institute, so I have a QRC. So I shored up our QRC, which has human factors engineers, has folks from Armstrong Institute, and individuals who have an interest in quality and patient safety research, and sent about 8 of those guys to Intermountain Healthcare for the healthcare delivery research. 2 more things and I'll be done. So I have 6 research and discovery and innovation cores. Then I had a group of MBAs. I've got an MBA. And these folks are as smart as can be in terms of operations research and operations management. So in partnership with Carey Business School, I have an operations management core of the folks in the department who have MBAs and who have just a knack for operations management research. And then the last core is we term Physio Cloud. As I joke, my daughter went to MIT, so I know how these kids are wired. And so I have a whole group of folks who are wired like MIT, Caltech, Rensselaer. And I have a partnership with biomedical engineering on our Homewood undergraduate campus. And we are doing amazing work, and eventually we'll shore up a I to the C to the third power, which it's Center for Computational Critical Care. So we're working with high-frequency physiologic data with a lot of my folks who had engineering undergraduate degrees. So coming to Hopkins and starting out with basic science 5 years ago, which was incredibly strong, and we're growing that with a little bit of clinical research, now to full 6 discovery and innovation cores, all with a retreat which has vision, a mission, targets of success. And now when I have our annual reviews with our department members, all 220, I ask each of them to assign themselves, the faculty, to one or more of the cores. So everyone has this research affinity group, is what we call it, that has regular meetings, journal clubs, e-labs, Q-labs. So it's pretty exciting.
Thank you. Thank you both for the introduction. Maybe I'll start with one question that I received in advance, because you both touched on sort of that transition from, maybe running your own group or doing science or, doing your own sort of independent work to this more managerial administrative positions. So when you're very junior and you get asked to be on committees, which seems to happen more and more, and especially in a way, I think if you're either a woman or underrepresented minority, you maybe get asked more because they hear that you say yes more often, or you have a harder time saying no. Which of those opportunities do you say yes to when you're junior? Which ones do you think are to be avoided? Is there any sort of general guidance on those kinds of things?
I think that I have to step back from that. That's a very good question, and you do have to be engaged. So we have our PDRs, professional development reviews, so every faculty has an academic roadmap at Hopkins. And a few very junior people will say, well, I want to be a division chief or I want to be a department chair. And I'm like, whoa, you got to, there's certain levels, like levels of leadership that you've got to transition through and master. And I'm trying to shore this up with more quantitative metrics on this. And part of that is, so level 1 would be when you're a faculty, you're just coming out. And I tell them, be good with your hands, be good with your trade. You've got to be a really good physician in whatever field you're in first. Secondarily, then I tell them I have a whole bunch of things in terms of leadership courses for junior people, what things you could read, to be on committees, to be a really good committee member. What does that mean? What can you learn from a committee? You have goals and objectives. So committee membership is very important. It depends on what the committee is and what might resonate, but being a good committee member locally, and then let's say with ASA or IARS, I think these things are very important.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what your goals are, and the path that you're going to take. If you're looking to take a leadership path, the answer to the question is probably different. You may want to get involved at the national level in more committees and organizations. If your goal is to pursue a research career and practice anesthesia and have research be a big part of your career, you may want to stay away somewhat from, not completely, but prioritize research over committee service, at least early in your career, to develop your research, your data, your portfolio, and to get funding for your research program. So I think it really depends on what your goals are and as far as what you want to get involved in early in your career. And it really is very important to be selective and pick those things that are going to really fit with your goals.
I'm just going to open up the floor to questions. I have more here prepared, but if anybody is interested in asking a question, please stand up at any point and we'll defer to you, but I can keep going. Okay, Dr. Mathis, he's up.
Thanks again, guys, for being here at this ESOS 4th annual meeting. My question for you, I think, is a question that's on most of the minds of the residents and the fellows that are in this audience. Is you've achieved so much and you've gotten so far along in your career. It's very hard to see how to get to that stage is fantastic. But what are the first few things that residents who are very focused on their clinical training, as they should be, and fellows that are focused on getting an expertise in their clinical field, they're very focused on that, but are looking towards just the first step to a successful career in academic anesthesia? What are the first few steps that you would recommend they take, either during their clinical training or immediately after?
What I do with our faculty, so the folks who are coming straight out, one is to make sure you have FaceTime with your chair, because that's going to be the person who's really going to help you advance. If you have an annual review, and it depends on what department you go to, so they've got 1-year, 5-year goals. So when you've got a roadmap in front of you as a junior person, you kind of calm down because you have certain metrics that you really want to succeed. And I usually tell them, if you don't meet those metrics, I failed you. So we got to make sure that these are realistic. The second really important thing is to find mentorship. So in our PDR, which is the academic roadmap, everybody's got to have a mentor. Or if they're senior, they have to mentor others. For the junior folks, they've got to tell me on their annual review how often they meet with their mentor, and then they have to grade them. So I think having mentorship, having an academic roadmap to start out. I tend not to have much pressure on our new faculty that come on board right out of training or fellowship or residency. I tell them to be good at your trade. So I tell them your first year, I want to see the resident they have free text they can enter, as well as a quantitative assessment of their teaching skills. So I tell them everybody's got to be an excellent educator. I want you to get your attending legs on. So be a really good clinician, be a very good educator. And then I try to tell them to get exposed to as many of our cores as they can, because some of them don't know what area they really want to focus in. Once they do choose a couple, they'll start taking off, because within those cores, I call it an affinity group. So you've got maybe 25, 30 physician anesthesiologists in these cores, some who cross-podulate. and they all act as a mentor as well. So a lot of it is about exposure and mentorship, setting priorities straight. Don't try to jump into the lab too much when you really do need to be a good anesthesiologist first.
Yeah, I think obviously mentorship is crucial. At the resident level, I think, at least at the institution that you're at, and also coming to meetings like this, is just to look around and find out what's going on, try and align that with your interest, and pick important and significant problems to solve, either through education or research, and then try to align yourself with a mentor who can point you in that direction, or can help you build your academic career. And along those lines, I think it's really important to get involved with a really strong group. I've really found that the people in our department who have done well have hooked up with not only just one mentor, but a mentor that has a really strong group of people working around them who are all supportive and working together. Because I've really found that the young faculty or people at the fellow level who are building their research careers need the support of other people who've been there, and you have all different levels of mentorship. You've got your senior mentor, and then you've got people that are mid-career level, and then people are at the beginning career level. And if you can hook into a group that has people at all those different levels, it can really be a great place to be as far as building your career. I think that's probably the really crucial factor, at least from what I've observed in my personal experience too.
And I think, just to echo that, you have to have someone advocate for you. So it's very hard when you're young and you're starting out. It's easy to hear us say these things, but you really do need a chair to say, okay, let's take a look at your portfolio this year. I do it by division, so cardiac is every September, OB is every November, regional is December. So every division knows when they're going to meet with me. And if you don't have a mentor, you're uncertain. It's your chair that's got to sponsor you to pick up the phone. I've got a mid-career person who's just stalled. And I said, I need someone who can do more in-depth genetics in our department. We don't have anyone right now. So the head of our genetics institute at Hopkins, a very famous guy, I'd asked, could you take on one of my mid-career people, mentor her? I'll send her to Maine. They have a big genetics meeting every year in Maine, 40th anniversary or 50th anniversary. But in any event, you've got to have a sponsor. You've got to have someone who's going to pick up the phone and say, I need you to mentor so-and-so. And this is why this is important to the department. I know she knows nothing about genetics, and she's mid-career, but she's really smart. She's done amazing work in the lab. It's just that the area that she's working in the lab is just hasn't panned out in the last 10 years. So it's this element of sponsorship, because when you're young, you don't see the road. You don't know what's ahead. You don't know how important mentorship is. And I tell people, look, if you don't like what you're doing, tell me next year. If you want to completely switch divisions up, which I've had happen, let's switch you up. And just because you're 50 or 48 doesn't mean you don't have a lot of game left in you. So I think there's a little bit of bias when you're older that they don't think they can switch. I said, I'll get you out of there. So you take them out and you give them a new mentor and you tell them, look, I need this. This is important for my department. She's really smart. She's got the skill set. She's going to start from ground zero, and we'll probably bring a lot of insight into your whole area of this certain work group in genetics, because she's got such a rich history of research. So it's that sponsorship. I'll say mentorship because that's your more immediate one, but that the sponsorship of the chair of your department should ensure that every one of you guys starting out, you've got to have a mentor. And if the mentorship's not working out, one of these guys graded one of their mentors with a 2, and I'm like, whoa, I've never seen 2 before. So I said, maybe it's time we get you a different mentor. It was one of a few of them, but you need a sponsor. You need someone to just, kind of elbow in there and say, why don't you try this for a year? Tell me what you think. If it's not great, we're going to move you out. But I want to see you progress academically. Let's give you some opportunities. And I usually tell my innovation and discovery corps chiefs, I've got medical directors for each, expect you to lead with serving leader competencies. I'm not going to micromanage you. Don't do anything illegal or spend too much money, because I'll get in trouble with the dean. But it's that sponsorship, giving people a skill set, putting them in, and then once you get in there, then you get your mentors.
And one thing I would add is I think it's important to find a department that has a culture of support, as is mentioned here at Hopkins and many other departments around the country, and to find a department that really has, one, a chair as well as other higher leadership in which career development is a priority, because those are the types of departments you want to be in to develop your career. That's not to say that you can't really develop your career in any department, but the ones that have a strong culture of faculty development are the ones to really take a strong look at.
I'll just add one small thing on the mentorship versus sponsorship. So I think a lot of people feel like mentorship is you're getting advice, and that's extremely useful. Sponsorship is giving you a lot of opportunity. And just a little plug for early stage anesthesiology scholars, or ESAS, which partly sponsored this event. I think ESAS is particularly good at sponsorship, in that it gives the opportunity for people at a junior stage to have the stage and to meet people and to give scientific talks at big meetings. And so I think that's also a great way that within your department you have that sponsorship, but also at a national level, groups like ESAS can help with sponsorship. So just one more plug to join our crew. You touched on a few things that I got questions on. So maybe I'll just start with, or go next to the question of choosing a larger versus smaller academic center as your first academic job, and how that might affect your career trajectory and opportunities. I realize you're both at large academic centers now, but maybe you can still speak to that.
Well, I started in a relatively small department. Like I think when I started at UTMB, we had about 35 clinical faculty, and at Vanderbilt, we've got somewhere around 140. So quite different sizes. I mean, I guess the size is important to some degree as far as the resources that could be available, maybe in a larger department that aren't available in a smaller department. But again, I think it boils down to the culture of the department and how supportive the department and the department chair in particular are of the research mission or education mission or other academic development missions. At UTMB was an incredibly supportive environment for me, and I know for several other people when I was there. And it really boiled down to our department chair, Don Pro, taking a big interest in our career development. And that was in a relatively small department. At Vanderbilt, we have the same culture. It's at a larger scale, and there are definitely more resources and opportunities available at Vanderbilt, which is the reason I moved there, because at UTMB, I could do tons of basic science research, but I couldn't take what I was doing to the clinical level. I moved to Vanderbilt, and I can do a clinical trial on the drugs that we develop in the lab. So you just have to look at what your goals are, and of course you can move around during the course of your career. I guess ideally it'd be great to stay in one place your whole career. This particular move for me worked really well. So I think it really boils down to the culture and how the resources that the department can offer to you as far as developing your interests and your career path.
Do you have anything to add?
I think that there's so many elements that go into play, big or small. I mean, first it's family. You know, where do you want to be? You know, to make sure happy wife, happy life, people say. I see a lot of gentlemen in the audience, and it's the other way around too. So I find that a lot of our trainees want to go with families. So our CA3s, before they graduate, I take them to dinner in groups of 4 and 5. And we talk about where they want to go. I take them to really nice restaurants that they say, I can't afford this. So I said, order anything you want. You know, only one drink though. So these are great opportunities because some want fellowship. So as a chair, again, as a sponsor, I can email any one of my friends and say, hey, this kid is really good. This young adult, I should say. They're my children's age, so I say kid. But they're very good, or they want to be with where their wife's family is. So a lot of these things will determine what city you want to go to. And intuitively, I would say talk to chairs, or if you're familiar with the chair, because we tend to know one another and we know who could help mentor you. And I think so, whether it's big or small, my department's huge, but it has such a small feel to it. In terms of, I know my residents, and again, our CA2s, I take to Boston with me on a field trip for 2 days and to get to know them as well. So it's getting to know the leadership of wherever you are. You can usually figure out what's the lay of the land before you go somewhere. If it's a good culture to work in, and, definitely figure that out. And if there's great mentorship within the department. And most of you guys at the junior stage can talk to any one of your buddies, and someone, it's about 2 degrees removed, that where you can figure out what the lay of the land is.
I'm just going to pause for a second and go back to have Dr. Mackey introduce himself briefly, and then we'll go to the question that I see the question in the audience.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I was hoping to make an impact on this session, but not in this way. When Viv texted me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I'll see you in a few minutes." Thinking the session, my calendar shows it starting at 10:15, and I looked at it 4 times, and it says 10:15. I didn't get the memo that moved it to 10:45, so I profusely apologize. This is like one of those bad dreams you have, except in the dream I'm usually naked. So
Thank you for
yeah.
wearing your suit today.
So, granted, I missed the early part of this, so I think the thing that everybody went and did first was some brief introductions, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, 2 minutes. So let me I've got this time down to about 2 minutes, and I'll keep it tight. So very briefly, my career started off in bioengineering and electrical engineering, where I ultimately completed my PhD. I was always excited about this intersection between technology and healthcare. Following medical school, I did a residency in anesthesiology at Stanford University, where I then ultimately went and did a pain medicine fellowship as well. I then joined the faculty there. The first few years were rather tough for me, as I was doing almost exclusively clinical work and having a hard time making a go of research, working nights and weekends, and realized I wasn't ever going to win that way. So I wrote and subsequently obtained a FAIR grant where it was provided with 75% protected research time. I was at that point off and running. My early research interests were in the area of cognitive neurosciences, specifically neuroimaging of the brain and spinal cord and its intersection with pain. And thanks to some advice I got from Jim Eisenach, thank you, Jim, he convinced me to skip that K pathway, the intermediate step, and go right to an R. So I wrote my first R01. I got it, had a 3 percentile. I was awarded it, and I thought, damn, this stuff is easy. If it's all this easy, I don't see what the big deal is. Little did I know the number of grants that would subsequently be shot down in a quite ugly manner. But the R01 solidified me as an adult in the research field for the first time. I subsequently used neuroimaging as a way to answer questions about the role of the brain and the spinal cord in human pain experience. And at the same time, I realized that our pain division at Stanford, needed to be rebuilt. We were a group with 2 or 3 people in it. We had never had research funding in our group. And I ultimately built it up to where we are now, probably one of the top 1, 2, or 3 pain divisions in the country from research funding. And we'd be ranked number 15 if we were a department of anesthesiology. Along the way, I realized I enjoyed mentoring and watching other people grow their career. We've had some spectacular successes. I've now been the PI of multiple R01s, a P01 Center grant. I'm a program director on a T32 training program. And after that, you hit a stage where you realize what's next. And I realized I wanted to give back. So I got involved with national leadership and policy. I've been president of our National Academy in Pain. I've co-chaired the Health and Human Services development of our country's national pain strategy and co-authored the IOM pain report. So in summary, I would say that when I was 5, I was convinced that being an astronaut was the coolest job you could have. Now I'm convinced it's doing what I'm doing right now. So again, thank you, and please accept my apologies for the lateness, and Vivian, back to you to continue this.
Thank you. So we'll take an audience question. Thanks for waiting.
Hi, my name's Julia Dubovitz. I'm from Australia, which is a small country town in comparison to I assume the hospitals that many of you work at. I am a fellow at Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, which is a 90-bed inpatient unit with 7 operating theatres. So just to give you context of how small. But that is my soul, my home, where I'm doing my PhD, where I want to work as a junior faculty member, and where I want to develop my research and leadership career. There are bigger hospitals, sort of in the order of 300 inpatient beds, to give you an idea of perspective. My question for the panel is, how do you build your career when you're in a small environment? Do you think that there are benefits and limitations to that, or do you think ultimately I will have to step out of my home and spread my wings a bit to get where I want to go?
So I guess my first question is, do you have skills? Okay. So because if not, so that would help determine whether or not you're, I would really advise you to leave. If you've got some research skills, I guess my next piece of advice is go make friends. Are you friendly?
I hope so.
Good. Go make friends and make friends with people who are really good with research. And establish some relationships with them. And relationships that ultimately it's a two-way win. You're benefiting them. So you're not just taking. You're benefiting them. And most people out there, particularly Australians, I've been there several times, amazing country, are very friendly, and they'll give back and they'll help you out. And start defining a little area that may be an incremental build on something that they're doing that intersects with what you're doing, and then ultimately I would suggest try to grow that into something that is your own.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it boils down to, I guess, what your goals are and are the resources available there to the people in particular and the physical resources available to do what you want to do. I mean, if you look around you, do you see people and facilities that will allow you to develop in an area that you want to go? And I think it'll be important, typically it's important to have a specified goal and to know which direction you're going in, especially if you're in a smaller place. And that's kind of where I was. I mean, I'm not sure how UTMB compares to your department, but I knew exactly what direction I wanted to go in, and I knew that there were people at UTMB that had similar interests to what I had, so I just latched on to that group, and it worked out very well. So I think it's a matter of finding out whether your goals and the resources available really align where you are, and if not, you may want to consider looking around.
Yeah, no, I would echo his comments as well.
Please feel free to stand up if you have other questions. Dr. Montana's making his way, as well as someone in the back.
Hi.
And please introduce yourselves,
yeah,
too.
Mike Montana from WashU St. Louis. My question is primarily for Dr. Koch, but anyone can answer this. So you mentioned that everybody in your department of 200 plus folks has some form of academic project and mission to work on. And not everybody is going to be running R01 funded labs and that sort of thing. So how do you end up trying to help people define smaller projects and come up with things that fit their skill sets? And do you encourage people to work in teams and groups? And just kind of, can you speak to some of the folks who are mainly clinicians, but how they get research projects working and going?
So we have the 6 Discovery and Innovation course, so everyone needs to have one of those in terms of their annual professional development, the PDR, an assignment to that. And within that, then they can work on individual initiatives, projects, grants. So each of those cores has goals and objectives and metrics of success. So each member, there's a number of folks who are in 2 or 3 different cores. Everything isn't an R01 or NIH funded. There's other funding agencies. We also have an internal grant funding mechanism called the STAR Award that we've had an incredible ROI on in terms of future success with grants. So if you take folks early on and you assign them to each of these cores and you talk to them about, what looks like success in that core, you've got an affinity group of people who are mentoring them. You've got their division chief who's helping mentor them. I'm looking at their portfolio once a year in terms of seeing that they are successful and are moving forward. So they have targets and metrics of what would be successful. Again, the more senior folks, the professors, I ask that they help mentor the more junior faculty. But it's by being in these groups and having metrics of success and having a vision where they can move forward. And I've been at Hopkins just for 5 years, and these cores have been slowly shored up over the last probably 2 years. So then each one of the cores, so if you go to our website, and part of it is internal for intranet, there's links to make it really simple. Where do I publish if I'm in implementation science? Boom, you click the link and you've got 50 journals in quality, safety, healthcare value. Where do I get money for external grants for implementation science? Boom, there's a whole list of grant agencies. And so these are the important elements that would help. What meetings do I present at? You know, should I go to IHI? Should I present something to ASA? So it's having all of these resources and mentorship and sponsorship within each of these cores that helps them.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, we have things organized a little bit differently. I think things all start within all the clinical divisions, especially in people that are interested in clinical research or informatics or education research. And typically, in all of our divisions, there are senior and mid-level people that can take on junior people as mentors and develop projects and determine interest and align themselves together. Once that occurs, if someone's interested in pursuing a particular project within our department, they can submit their project to what we call VACRAC, which is basically a research committee that's composed, the central composition of it is 8 senior faculty within our department. And if you submit a project, then that project is assigned to one of those people as a facilitator. And then you go through that both you, your mentor, and the facilitator go through the whole project, make sure it's developed to a level that's adequate, and then we do what's called the studio, where you come and you present your project, you know, for 10 or 15 minutes, you know, PowerPoint presentation. There's a whole panel there to then, you know, flesh out everything, make sure you're moving in the right direction, make sure the project is developed to a level that's going to be successful. It has a high likelihood of success. And then from within that, you can, depending on the resources needed, you can apply for departmental funding or just plug into available department funding as far as informatics and clinical research infrastructure to get the project going. So I think different departments have different ways of organizing things, but what it really boils down to is mentorship and also making sure that a project is developed and it has a high likelihood of success. Because, I mean, and I guess that really is what mentorship is all about.
I think the only thing I would add that's really building on what has already been said is, you know, a focus on the person themselves. 2/3, 3/4 of our faculty now are in this clinical educator line. They're not going to be R01 funded investigators, and so we don't want to force a round peg into a square hole. Instead, we want to find out what their passions are, where their career interests are going. And so it's determining where they see themselves, ideally in 3 and 5 years, and then identifying projects that will help them achieve that goal, and then putting together all the pieces that you've just heard from my colleagues here.
Thank you all.
Is there another question in the back?
Good morning. Carla Todaro, neuroanesthesia fellow, London, Ontario. My question is if you have any particular suggestion for IMG in terms of paths to follow to advancing in academic career.
In the United States, do you mean?
United States and Canada.
Okay. Like coming from somewhere else, okay.
I didn't really
So I think the question was about if you're an international medical graduate moving to the North America or just to any different country, is there any advice on trying to build an academic career when you may be not familiar with the, you know, the local customs or the local path? Something to that effect.
I can just make a point, you know, as a department chair, if you talk to department chairs, send an email. It depends on what. Is there an area of the country you want to be in? If you've got family there, is there an area of research that, you know, you've looked at the website, you've talked to people, you've seen folks present, and there's something really intriguing, be it from biomedical engineering to education research, talk to that person, ask if you can come and take a visit to the department. A lot of departments are very open to things like that. I think some of the elements of, when you mention that, you think of visa issues, which can be just a headache for an applicant, but I think you need to reach out. I think these meetings are really great for networking because go, listen, look at some of the poster presentations, talk to the presenter, say, do you have a card? Can I email you? I'm coming to Washington or Baltimore. Could I spend a day in your department? And I get that probably 3 or 4 times a year. I'll pair them up with somebody and they'll spend time in the department looking around. So I would say get yourself out there, but these meetings are really critical. And go around to the posters, talk to people. Think about what area of the country that you might have an interest in.
I think there was a question that didn't get asked.
Oh,
I'm Rachel Mintz-Cole. I'm a critical care fellow at UC San Diego. My question borders along work-life balance. As a wife and a mother, I often find supporting my husband's career and being a mom is in conflict with my career aspirations, and you all have very illustrious careers. So the question is, how have you managed to find that balance in your work-life balance and still achieve what you've achieved?
And I'm just going to take that one step further because I did have a pre-question on this, which is, and maybe Dr. Koch can answer, is, are there special considerations as a woman that you found, you got advice on or helped you navigate your own career?
so you ask the right question because I'll tell our trainees or junior faculty and when I have our annual reviews with particularly the women and the young men nowadays, that your family, it's the most important thing and you can't screw it up. So that should be your top priority is your family. I'll probably never retire, so it's a long, I love what I do. So I try to tell people there's not this race that you have to get to a certain point at a certain time. So I'm 10 years older than most of my friends who became department chairs. But I had 3 kids. I wanted 5, and I'm looking at you because I see you in the back. I wanted 5 kids. The husband was an interventional cardiologist. Now he does non-invasive cardiology. So you have to be so strategic about how you're going to approach this. I knew I could not be a chair and be the mom I wanted to be at the same time of raising, preteens and teens. So I knew I had to get at least 2 kids launched. As I said earlier, the youngest driving, with no ticket for 2 months, and then I literally started looking for chair jobs. And along that way, I had a blast. I picked up skill sets that I probably never would have picked up, which really differentiate me right now for what I'm doing in terms of medical operations and health system stuff. I tell a lot of young women and men now, too, that your career, set targets for yourself. So it can be like this before you have kids, but I got to tell you, for me, it's not flat, it's a slower incline. So for me, for meetings, you have to sit and say, okay, how long can I be away from the kids, particularly when you got one in diapers? So I found out it was 2 nights, 3 days, max, done. So if someone asked me to go to a meeting, I'd say, and it used to be that ECHO meeting, and it used to be in San Diego, and they're like, oh, Cook, we got you on Sunday, and then you give them one on Thursday, you get all week in San Diego. I'm like, I can't do it. You got to bunch me up, and I'm going to go for 2 nights, 3 days, that's it. And I did that for 10, 15 years, and when I had kids, anyone in diapers, I'd only go away twice a year. So what does that mean for your promotion, particularly as a woman? Particularly at Hopkins, how you get promoted is to go do national and international talks. So if you've got a family, it's a little bit slower. So you could be full professor by age 40, but you weren't home with the kids. And so I think there's a balance there where you've got to figure out what your litmus test is. My husband couldn't handle 3 kids at night, getting them into the tub. It was a nightmare, but so that really limited me as well. He just couldn't do it, and that's why I didn't have 5 kids. We only had 3. So take a look at that. Figure out, all of you, men and women, what type of parent do you want to be? I was room mom for all my kids' classrooms in prime because it was just so important to me to go ice cookies and go on field trips. Now, in anesthesia, you can do it. Pre-call, we'd go in at 5, 7 o'clock at night. Post-call, you're off the next day at 7 a.m. So you can do a lot of this stuff. You're going to be tired the rest of your life once you have children. And this was something I wanted to do. And could I have written a grant and written more papers during that interval? Yes, I could have. But now I look back, I've got 3 great kids, a balanced life. I'm 10 years older, but I'll probably die with my boots on. So you can do it, and it's how you pace yourself, and you have to be so incredibly strategic because you don't want to screw up your families. Excuse me for using that word, but You really don't want to. And everyone's different. I had friends who did not want to ice a cookie or go on a single field trip. And that's okay too, if you're that type of mom or dad. So you've got to figure out what type of parent you want to be and partner, and then plan everything else around it. But put the family first, and you can be successful. It's not a rate-limiting step to be a great mom, a great wife, and a great anesthesiologist.
That's a wonderful story. I can speak from a dad perspective. I clearly have no comprehension of what a woman goes through in this environment, and I'm not going to even try. I have one child, Ian. He was born at Stanford. I'm very selfish. He looks just like me. We're clones of each other, and I wanted to be around him. And so, being selfish, I brought him on rounds at the age of 2. And he was on rounds with me, and continues to show up on. He's 22 now. I found that research did provide a lot of flexibility and a lot of control, because when he went into baseball, and he played baseball for many, many years, I was the team photographer, and so I could step out of the lab and I could go and shoot the game and enjoy watching him play. And then when I was done, I would come back to the lab and I'd continue working. I also brought him into the lab, so I put him to work around the age of 8, and I taught him how to build computers, and he became our IT guy at the age of 8. At the age of 14, he brought me the employment paperwork and said, I can now be hired, and here's the salary I would like. He did a gap year with us after high school and came in and ran multiple research programs, research protocols for us, and along the way he developed interest in our lab in social media, and he absolutely transformed our lab and our division in the area of social media. Talked to her about what Ian has done for the Twitter account, and it has been absolutely amazing. So I heard the term balance, and I get it. I get that term balance. I try to get away from the term balance because it feels like there's this tension. You have to choose this or that. And sometimes you do, but what I hope I've tried to give you a sense of is sometimes you don't have to choose. Maybe you can find ways of integrating them together so that both sides win.
I see we have a lot of questions. I just have one question for the panelists based on those discussions. Do you sleep? Any of you at all?
Yeah.
A little bit. Doug, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Douglas Colhoun. I'm an anesthesiologist and critical care medicine physician at the University of Michigan. I'm finishing up a T32 fellowship there and joining the faculty. I wondered if you could reflect for a moment on just a little bit more about what early career milestones should look like. We've talked about establishing mentorship. We've talked about establishing topical areas and establishing yourself clinically. But I wonder if you could flesh that out from the perspectives of each of your departments.
Well, it's going to vary from person to person depending on what your goals are. I mean, I guess looking at it from a faculty development standpoint, I mean, ultimately you're going to want to move up the academic ladder to, getting appointment as assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor. And every institution has their own milestones that you have to achieve to be promoted. Of course, there are different tracks for promotion as well, and that kind of serves as a guideline for what you should be shooting for, because every institution has its own criteria for what is going to be required to become promoted. And of course, within your career itself, I mean, you have to look at what your goals are, and do you want to achieve NIH funding, or are you taking a different path? So I think there are personal goals as far as where you want to take your academic career, all that fit within the institutional hierarchy as far as what you're going to need to do to get promoted along the way. So to me, it's a combination of those factors.
So for our PDR, our professional development review tool, and it's about 8 to 10 pages, it is set up for promotion. So when we sit down and then we have a targeted conversation with a box check that have we talked about what you need to get promoted. So we would sit down and say, okay, 5 years I want to see you get associate professor. This is what it takes. Go to the resources. You can look at the slide deck that is the talk on how to become an associate professor at Hopkins. you need about, on average, X amount of first author publications. You have to be an recognized expert nationally. So let me see if I can give so-and-so a call to have you go give a talk. And then in return, we'll do an exchange of horses midstream, which we do with a couple academic departments, where we switch off our assistant professors to be able to go give talks to get promoted. So from education, there's a whole portfolio of what it takes to get promoted to an associate professor at Hopkins. The annual review tool is set up with those categories. There's resources to provide you with what it takes to hit that target. So that's usually about where we would be with the target. Internal promotions committees, I have the junior folks meet with them at least about every other year, meet with the folks from those committees to see if they're on target, what else they need to do. So it would depend on the promotional process at Michigan. I don't know what it looks like, but I can only speak to Hopkins.
And just underscoring some of what was said, and maybe just one particular area, I think defining an area of focus. Some of the biggest challenges I find with junior faculty are that, and particularly at the larger institutions, they're kids in a candy store and they want to sample all the candy. The problem is that you end up engaging in a lot of Brownian motion. It's expending a lot of energy and maybe even being productive, but not having a clear path forward. There was a junior faculty member that I was called in to see if I could help rescue his career, because while he'd published a decent number of papers, a large number of papers actually, they didn't feel he was worthy of even going to assistant professor in our institution because they couldn't figure out who he was. He was doing everything. So we sat down and we cleaned up a lot of his areas of interest, and we taught him to say no, no, and just to find the one thing that he really wanted to do with his career. And since then, the guy's just taken off because he has learned to focus and establish now even a national reputation in his area.
So I think we'll keep taking questions from the audience. I might direct them a little bit because we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure everybody gets their questions in. So go ahead.
Sure. So I'm Jamie Pravratsky. I'm from Duke. Just a question kind of on the area of focus. I think one of the great things of anesthesiology is you can kind of do whatever you want, but that's also sometimes a weakness. And I think probably Dr. Sherwood could speak to this the best. How do you, if your area of focus is not in a traditional anesthesiology research area, and I know I've ran into this, talked to other trainees that have too, how do you break into those clubs of other areas of research interest? Because for some of us, that's going to be an important thing. Like, this is a great meeting, everyone here, we want to support each other, but you might not always find that in other areas. And we probably do the same to other specialties as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to get involved in the organizations and people that are in the area that you're interested in. For instance, for me, my two biggest meetings are the Shock Society and the Society for Leukocyte Biology, and AUA also. But those outside of anesthesia, I kind, from a career development standpoint, I kind of consider myself to be even more in the immunology field than in the anesthesia field. Clinically, I do anesthesia, but my research is in immunology. So, and you can easily align yourself in those two different areas. And you just have to meet people, go to the meetings that align with your interest, and things will start to take off.
I think just one other comment is sponsorship. You got, because you're young and you're not connected at the level that you need to be able to get a mentor. So to have someone, you said you're at Duke. I'm sure Joseph, if you said, Joseph, this is an area that I'm really interested in, can you do the sponsoring, i.e. make a phone call? Let me set up an email introduction with this individual and then go and meet with them. But at your level, you need someone to sponsor you to be able to make these connections to get you to that next level. It's too hard to do it completely by yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you definitely need to have people that can facilitate you meeting people. I mean, you can't, I guess you could go out there and do it on your own, but it'll be much easier if you know people in that area that can really facilitate interactions for you.
Okay, I think we'll go to the next question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a CA3 at Stanford, and I'm going to be going on a T32 next year. And this question is mostly based off what Dr. Koch said, related to how clinical mastery is really an important initial priority, and building on top of that educational skills with being able to teach residents. And I'm wondering how you strike the balance between the career trajectory of people who are very research focused, maybe only in the OR 1 day a week, and still achieve those goals. Often at Stanford, it works out too that the people who are only in the operating room 1 day a week are not even necessarily working with residents at all. And so is there anything in particular that you do to balance achieving those goals while still keeping the priority on research and developing that career path?
Well, again, I asked each faculty to choose one of those innovation discovery cores. But early on, when they got right out of training, they focused on the clinical work. So if you looked at that curve from this morning, you've hit the target of not quite master, but mastery to a certain level where you know you're good with your hands. You could take call at night. You could do weekends. We do have targets for the questions to capture the essence of a good educator are developed in this PDR forum. They were written by the residents a few years ago, and with free text. So I can usually get a pretty good, in terms of a litmus test on how they're doing as an educator. So they've done those things and maintain those things as they go along and then start building their research career. So it's not mutually exclusive. I think early on, you got to really master your clinical skills because you'll be like a fish out of water every time you come to the OR if it's just a day a week and you've been doing it for 15 years. So I don't know if that helped answer.
Well, I guess the follow-up would be that sort of on the trajectory of the T32 to the K to kind of everything, I mean, the expectation, the whole pathway is like 20% clinical time. So that kind of is by definition like 1 day a week in the OR. So how do you balance more early in the career to find your footing with that clinical mastery, I guess?
Well,
Take extra call.
yeah, well, no. Yeah.
We need you on the schedule, Chris.
Yeah, you can't do the call. They're good at what they do in that particular day, and I don't want to say it's kind of like the residency training. When I say you need to be good at your trade, it doesn't mean that it's, again, mutually exclusive of everything else. If you think of milestones with training, and who spoke at AUA yesterday or one of the main sessions that gone are going to be the days of you need 3 years of training. You just hit these milestones where you're very good at it, not time related. Ideally, I do tell folks, particularly if they're not a T32, focus on your career the first year to get your attending legs on. The T32 folks seem to do just fine. I've got 5 of them a year, and they all transition to faculty quite well. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as mutually exclusive, but to put a spotlight on the fact that focus on your clinical skills when you first get out, even if it's just a day a week, but make sure you get that mastery and you can take call.
Let's get to the last question. I think that will end our time.
I'm Dan Larrick. I'm a Payne Fellow at Cornell. I'll be faculty at USC in a couple of months. I was wondering if you had any advice for 2 physician couples in which both want to do academics.
Well, son, it could take all day. No, so I've been that for 33 years. It's a lot of communication, a lot of balancing and strategy. Again, like I said, I wanted 5 kids. Husband said I can't do more than 3. How long can you be away at a meeting without your partner just going absolutely crazy if they're home with the kids? So you've got to figure that out. If you've got in-laws that live with you, you could do whatever you want, but or maybe not, maybe you'd be divorced by then. So you've got to, it's so specific to what you're doing, but you got to have great communication. You got to figure out, what's working. You got to get a lot of help. You got to have someone help clean your house. You can't be doing it as you get home and you're both trying to do things. I do tell folks, our junior faculty, when your kids are awake, do not do work. So, don't get on your iPhone. Don't start trying to write papers. When the kids are in bed, that's when you can get your work done. And what I would do when I had 3 kids, all 3 years apart, I didn't ever want 2 in diapers, so I spaced them out, one at 30, one at 33, one at 36. That's a little OCD, but I just knew I couldn't handle it, nor could my husband handle 2 in diapers. But the kids would sleep in if we didn't have ice hockey. And so I'd get up at 5 a.m. and work till 10. So I could get 5 hours in with everybody sleeping. And if you do the same thing on Sunday, you can get 10 hours of academic work done before anyone wakes up. I had zero guilt taking a nap. So if I didn't get a lot of sleep and it was 3 in the afternoon and I wanted to crash for an hour, I would do so. But I never wrote papers, anything while the kids were awake, in general, I should say. There may have been a moment in time, but if you can try to adhere to that principle, I think your life's going to be a lot easier. If you can protect time out of your schedule on a weekend where if the wife is taking, your kids to music lessons and you're not going to go and you can carve out time that's regular, you'll be able to get things done in a much more strategic manner because you're not going to mess around. If you know you only have 5 hours on Sunday morning to get work done, you're going to be incredibly efficient. I hope that helped. Good luck.
And I can just briefly comment about with a little bit later in life. So you said my son's 22. My partner is also in the field, and we typically work 28 days a month, and then we take off 2 days and we go do something spectacular. It's got to be something really amazing for those 2 days. And it works. It keeps things really fresh and alive. It helps that she's in the same field that I'm in. And the other thing is during trips, we support each other on that. So when she's giving a keynote, I go and carry her luggage, and I'm the bag boy. And when I go on trips and I'm giving the keynote, I don't have her carry the bags. But yeah, and we have a cleaning lady as well. So
you got to have some help. Yeah.
So there's a lot of tricks out there. I think you're doing the right thing, which is ask from those people who've made it work.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. I think we have a couple of minutes break, and then the next session starts at 10:55. Is that correct? My timekeepers? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you all, and I hope you'll continue the conversation during the break, and a huge thank you to our panelists.